been another historic week in an ever-changing 2024 election. Thanks for joining us here on The Real Story. I'm Emma Wolforst. A stunning moment as President Joe Biden spoke to the nation from the Oval Office this week for the first time after dropping his re-election bid, rare fewer than just 100 days before polls open.
Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands.
A political career that spanned more than 5 decades. Beyond removing himself from the November ballots, Americans are now speaking about Biden's legacy, as he says, passing the torch to the next generation. After that letter resigning from re-election was posted online, our lawmakers from Capitol Hill all the way to the state capitol here in Hartford poured over Biden's policy and the investments he's made, sending federal funding to our state. But it can't be forgotten. The people who met and worked with President Biden say he's a lot more than just his legislative legacy. We caught up with Hartford's mayor, Arunan Arulampalam, who met the president during the National Mayor's Conference. Snowing in D.C. this past December, Arunan, born in Zimbabwe to Sri Lankan parents, was wearing a wool coat. That wool coat belonged to his grandfather, who fought in the Sri Lankan War. He says after he told Biden that fact, he saw exactly who the president is.
President Biden said, just wait here a moment. And he talked to a line of other mayors, some mayors far more important than might be from much bigger cities. And then at the end, he called me back and he told me to call my parents. And so I called my parents. He took the phone. He said, "Hi, this is the president of the United States." And he had this long conversation with them about his family that came from Ireland, about stories he'd shared with President Obama about their families. And, you could sense in him that he saw something special about our story, about that American dream. And that stoked something inside of him that when he could have been out talking to far more important politicians, he wanted to have this long conversation with my parents. And then as that phone call was wrapping up, I thought about my kids. As you know, I've got 5 small kids. And when I was going to D.C., they said, "Are you going to meet the president?" I said, "No, guys, I'm definitely not going to meet the president." And they said, "Well, if you do, make sure you show him a picture of us." So I pulled out my phone to show the president a picture of my kids. And just at that moment, it happened that my wife was calling me. And so the president picked up and said, "Hi, this is President Joe Biden." And she was with all the kids. And so they started freaking out. And I kid you not, the president himself said, hit the FaceTime button. So can you FaceTime? And he hit the FaceTime button on my phone. And he FaceTimed with each of my kids. He talked to every single one in a row. Just a remarkable moment of connection, and was so personal and it's so heartfelt. In his heart, he believes in an America where people can come to this country and make it and do great things and contribute to this country. That he believes in people, and to him, the status, the power is far less important than the human connection.
We've gotten so many more reactions and stories just like that one from Mayor Arulampalam. President Biden bowing out of the race came as a surprise to some, but also fairly expected after so much pressure from within his own party. Adding to this chaotic election, his announcement coming just 1 week after former president and current candidate Donald Trump was shot at his campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Amidst all of this, President Biden's own delegates finding out with the rest of the world. Joining me now are 2 of those delegates, State Representative Josh Elliott and College Democrat leader Jennifer Croughwell. Both of you, Jennifer, Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have to ask first, I know Representative Elliott, we actually spoke a few days ago earlier in this week about all this. I haven't spoken with you about it yet, Jennifer, but just to start out, tell me a little bit about how you found out that President Biden was dropping out of the race on Sunday, and what were your reactions like? Jennifer, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it was definitely very interesting. I was actually heading to a pool party with my state representative, Susan Johnson. She was having a pool party for her husband, Dennis O'Brien, and it was really interesting. And I got to speak with Joe Courtney right after it was dropped the news. And, I'm hopping on a meeting with my fellow College Democrats of America. We're discussing, what kind of statement we would like to put out. We actually ended up putting a joint statement together with Young Democrats of America and High School Democrats of America, supporting President Biden and all of his legacy that he's left, and being thankful that he was there for a time of need, but thankful that he stepped down and had put his own values aside and made sure that he fought for America and what, our freedoms. I think, after we heard that he endorsed Kamala Harris, we wanted to do the exact same. We shortly put out a statement endorsing her as well as the College Democrats of America. So it was definitely interesting to hear from my own representatives, my state representative, my U.S. representative, right after, and kind of in seeing that moment together was definitely one I won't miss.
Yeah, and Representative Elliott, I believe you told me you were actually out door knocking when this news came down, right?
Right. I was knocking doors. I'd been out for about 2 hours with my girlfriend, and I got a text from my friend who said that Biden had just dropped out, and we looked at each other, just quiet, and we went to the car and just sat in silence for a moment and talked about what that would entail. And after about a minute, it was like, okay, now we gotta knock some more doors. And immediately started talking with constituents that I was letting them know. And for the past couple of months, there was a lot of fear and almost desperation. And being able to bring this news to people was almost like bringing this glint of hope door to door. So it was really nice.
And Jennifer, you mentioned not only hearing reactions from, your peers, from state and U.S. representatives right after, but I think you said something about also, appreciating his decision to step aside. We know that a lot of the conversation and the calls for him to drop out of the race really revolved around age. And you are the youngest delegate for Connecticut, but also, a leader for the College Dems organization. Tell me about what role age really played in your view of the party, as well as after seeing Biden actually step down this past week.
Yeah, I definitely think it was a pivotal moment when he did step down. I think that, as age will play a role into this, especially, with younger voters. People weren't energized as much as they are with Kamala Harris, being the candidate now. It's just a very interesting turnaround. I think people are going to be more energized, especially young voters, especially our young Democrats, are going to be ready to go out the polls. They've had 66,000 volunteers sign up for Kamala Harris's campaign, and I think we've even College Democrats, we've had so much more interest in joining College Democrats, starting a chapter on their own college and getting ready for this election in November.
Yeah, and Representative Elliott, after getting over that initial surprise, as you both have mentioned, President Biden then immediately endorsing his VP Kamala Harris to take his place at the top of the ticket. We know the DNC hasn't happened yet, but we've seen this past week, basically just 48 hours after Biden stepped aside, Harris became basically the presumptive nominee, with polls showing enough delegates had now pledged their support for her. And we know in those hours following Sunday, Connecticut's delegates did that as well. There was this virtual meeting. We know this is non-binding. Obviously, come the convention and the virtual roll call, delegates could vote for whoever they wanted. But there was that pledge, as many other states did, from Connecticut. So Representative Elliott, I'll start with you. Tell me a little bit about what that virtual meeting was like and what you were hearing from your fellow delegates.
Sure. It was a temperature check. It was just seeing where the state was going to be. Now, I was already a whip for the Biden campaign, and the infrastructure all stayed in place, so I very quickly became a whip for the Harris campaign. And I have a lot of relationships with the delegates that are going out. I actually met Jen a couple of months ago as I was talking with folk. And it was a Zoom that we did. So all the delegates, there was about 60 or so of us on this call, was happening the same time that there was a leadership Zoom that was happening from the campaign. So I was doing a little bit of double duty, watching what the role as whip was going to be, while I was seeing all of my delegates and friends were voting for Kamala, because some of the role is to ensure that our party goes with Kamala, but there was very little work to do to ensure that that happened because people were already there.
Right. And Jen, for you, did that feel like, a smooth transition as well? As soon as he endorsed her, did you also feel like that was the next step for you to pledge your support for Harris?
Yes, definitely, especially as the College Democrats National Council Chair. I wanted to contact states to see how they were feeling, across the nation, and they all coalesced around Kamala Harris. It was honestly a bit inspiring to see how much unity, how much excitement was coming from the young Democrats across the nation. It was like a whole different ball game, I would say. It was, instead of having that little bit of fear, but we still have to work, it was more excitement, and now we still have to work. But it's definitely going to be an exciting time. I think it's a different ball game. I just have to say that it's very exciting for the young Democrats across the nation.
And you said it's a change in momentum, but still requires a lot of work. We know from speaking with analysts and those, around her campaign, that part of that work is also introducing her now as her own entity to American voters, because as the vice president, your role is really to support the president. So we've heard from a lot of people that they just don't really know who Kamala Harris is separate from the Biden administration. Obviously, really still wanting to tie her to the administration and all of those wins, but in fewer than 100 days before November, also show her record and her policy. Representative Elliott, what conversations have you been having with people around, her candidacy, her platforms, her policies, especially as a whip for her campaign?
I think you're exactly right. I think that what's happening now is that there's going to be a major education campaign on really who she is.
Right.
Because what was happening was that there was a lot of fear that Joe Biden, our president, was a little bit too old, was maybe slowing down, and so there was excitement to have somebody new, and really everything that we were looking for is embodied in Kamala Harris and the vice president. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper and say, so what is it policy-wise that she's looking to accomplish? What does she bring other than the fact that she'll be the first black woman who'll be our president? What substantively is there as well? And of course, we know what her background is in terms of the work that she's done in California, but I do think that a number of conversations with delegates are, okay, so how do we get information from the campaign to then spread it to volunteers, to paid canvassers, to people on the ground floor, to then get them excited and on board. Because we're not the normal people. We're the ones who are really engaged with this work. We really know that Kamala's going to be great for this country. And so now I think we're sort of learning about how to explain that to other people. And we're really still in the midst of that, I think.
Being that intermediary. And quickly here, we know a big part of this as well is the state's relationship with the White House, with what comes out of the Biden administration. We've seen our congressional delegation here in Connecticut work really closely with things like the bipartisan infrastructure bill, bringing a lot of federal funding. A lot of our leaders work very closely with different legislative priorities of the Biden administration. How has this tied to, if at all yet, because I know it's still really soon, but how is this tied to what her candidacy and presidency could still mean for the state of Connecticut?
I think she's been a really strong leader, and I know that Senators Murphy and Blumenthal, who've worked really closely with her, have both endorsed her and are both really excited for her. So a lot of what we do, especially at the Capitol, is if we don't know a lot about an issue, we look to the people that do know a lot about that issue. We look to the people that have served with these different folk. And just by the fact that Kamala has gotten endorsements not just from our own congressional delegation, but from also anybody across the U.S. who is looking to potentially throw their hat in the ring, by the fact that Governors Whitmer and Newsom and Shapiro, and you have Senator Kelly, all these people who are really incredible in their own right, immediately coming out and saying, we support Kamala. There's not, again, the substance yet in terms of how exactly this will be beneficial for Connecticut and what sort of work that we will be able to continue. But by the fact that there are these people that have worked with Kamala year over year are saying that we are firmly behind her in as quick of a time as it happened. And again, these people could have run for president on their own. They were all really incredible leaders and advocates, and they all said, no, we want to ensure that this person who we really believe in has this shot. And again, I think that a lot of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what we're doing in Connecticut right now as delegates is learning from the campaign about exactly what the messaging they're looking from us for as well.
And Jennifer, with our last minute here, obviously, as the youngest delegate for Connecticut and as a leader with College Democrats, you're, I assume, appealing to a lot of young voters as well, and speaking with those who are maybe this will be their first election voting or who are getting ready or getting more interested. We have seen a lot of apathy from young people. A lot of people feel like they're not really wanting to be involved in politics, but as both of you have talked about, there's been this shift since Biden stepped aside and Kamala Harris being significantly younger. You know, what are you hearing in terms of, you know, that want to be involved in politics? Do you feel like this is getting people more interested in the race with the shift in candidacy now?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's made politics seem so much more accessible. You know, a lot of young folks are just afraid of getting into politics because it seems very confusing. And it was made on purpose, and, you know, trying to teach it in a different way, you know, with the whole TikTok and the Instagram phenomenon with Kamala Harris, you know, it's been so much more accessible. They understand how it's working, you know, we're teaching people and younger folks like how Kamala Harris came to be the nominee and how she is the presumptive nominee right now, and that we're going to vote on her in the DNC convention. So it's, you know, it's a bit more accessible, and I think that's why young people are so ready and eager to get involved. It's like they can be a part of something, and it's not so detached from their day-to-day.
Well, Jennifer, Josh, thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have, but definitely we'll be checking in again. We know the DNC is coming up really, really soon, so we'll definitely have to be checking in with you. But thank you both again for taking the time.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Of course, and don't go anywhere, though. There's still so much more to get to here on The Real Story. We're talking more about the presumptive nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. Now that we're in uncharted political waters, what are the challenges, logistics, momentum, and more? We'll break it all down. Stay with us.